The evening sky was painted in soft orange as Daniel walked back from work. He lived in a small town where nothing unusual ever happened. The streets were quiet, the houses all lined up neatly, and his home stood at the end of the lane. He liked the peace of his life, the routine that made everything predictable. But on this day, the moment he unlocked the door and stepped into his living room, that quiet life shattered. Two women stood there. They were not like anyone Daniel had ever seen. They were tall, graceful, and their movements were strangely deliberate, almost like dancers. Their eyes glowed faintly silver, and their long hair shimmered in the dim light of his lamp. Their clothes were unlike any fashion he knew, smooth, fabric that seemed woven from liquid metal, flowing around their bodies as if it had a life of its own. Daniel froze. His first thought was that he had been robbed. Maybe these were intruders wearing costumes. But when one of them turned her head and fixed her strange silver eyes on him, he realized he was wrong. The first woman raised her hand slowly, as though calming him. Her voice was soft, but the words were broken, as if she had learned only a little English. "This house, ours now," she said. "We claim, we stay." Daniel's mouth dropped open. "Excuse me, this is my house." The second woman stepped forward. Her hair was darker, almost black, and her face had sharper lines. She tilted her head, studying him as though he was a puzzle. "You, human, not enemy, but house, safe. We need safe." Daniel's pulse quickened. He considered running back outside and calling the police, but something about their presence stopped him. They didn't move like criminals. They didn't even look nervous. Instead, they carried themselves with a strange dignity, as if they truly believed they had the right to stand there. "What do you mean, safe?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" The first woman exchanged a glance with the second. They whispered in a language Daniel had never heard. The sounds were musical but sharp, filled with tones and pitches his ears struggled to follow. Finally, the first woman turned back to him. Not from here," she said carefully. "Not from this world." Daniel blinked. For a moment, he thought it was a joke. Maybe he was on a hidden camera show, but then he noticed the small device attached to the woman's wrist, a sleek band glowing with symbols that floated above it like holograms. No company on Earth made anything like that. "Aliens," Daniel whispered before he could stop himself. The second woman gave a small nod. "Yes, from far, ship broken, lost, hide." Daniel staggered back a step. His knees felt weak, and his mind spun in disbelief. "This can't be real. You're saying you crashed on Earth?" "Yes," the first woman said. Her silver eyes softened, almost pleading. "Forest, not far. Dangerous for us, but house. Warm. Safe." Daniel rubbed his forehead. This was insane. He had just come home expecting dinner and maybe a quiet night watching television. Now 2 alien women were standing in his living room, claiming his house as theirs. He didn't know whether to laugh, panic, or faint. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Listen," he said firmly. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but this is my home. You can't just walk in and say it belongs to you." The second woman crossed her arms. Her expression was unreadable. "On our world," she explained slowly, "place of shelter belongs to those who need. Host is honored. You, our host. We stay." Daniel shook his head. "That's not how it works here. This is private property. People get arrested for this." The first woman's eyes flickered with confusion at the word arrested. She leaned slightly toward him. "You want fight? We not fight. We only survive." Her words struck Daniel. For the first time, he noticed how tired they both looked. There were faint scratches on their arms, dirt on their clothing, and a weariness in their eyes. They didn't look like invaders. They looked like refugees. Something in Daniel's heart softened. Still, he couldn't just accept strangers living in his house. especially not strangers from another world. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why my house?" The first woman smiled faintly, as if the answer was obvious. She pointed toward him. "Because you kind." Daniel blinked in surprise. "You don't even know me." "Not need know," she said. "We feel kind." Her words unsettled him but also warmed him. He had no idea what she meant, but there was a strange sincerity in her tone. Daniel sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not saying I believe all this alien stuff, but even if I did, people will notice you. My neighbors will notice you. You can't just stay here." Though, second woman stepped closer, her silver eyes gleaming. "We can hide. You help." "Why would I help?" Daniel asked. The answer came not in words, but in the way they both looked at him, eyes wide, vulnerable, like travelers far from home who had no one else to trust. Daniel felt trapped. He could call the authorities, but what if they really were aliens? What would happen to them then? Scientists, governments, and maybe even the military would tear them apart with questions and experiments. He couldn't imagine turning them in if their only crime was surviving. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound. Finally, Daniel let out a shaky laugh. "This is insane," he muttered. "Completely insane." The first woman tilted her head, confused by the word insane. But when Daniel looked back at them, he saw a small spark of hope in their eyes. "Fine," he said at last. "You can stay. For now. But just until I figure out what to do and you can't cause trouble, got it?" Both women exchanged a glance, then nodded eagerly. The first woman even bowed slightly. "We honor, we stay quiet, we safe." Daniel sighed again, feeling both relief and dread. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. 2 alien women were in his home, claiming it as theirs, and he had allowed it. His quiet life had just ended. And deep inside, he knew, whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds from the living room. Every creak of the floorboard reminded him that 2 alien women were sitting only a few steps away. His life had turned upside down in a single evening, and no amount of reasoning could make it feel normal. At dawn, he forced himself out of bed. His house felt different now, as though it no longer belonged entirely to him. He found the 2 women awake, sitting, cross-legged on the floor. They didn't seem to need much rest. Their eyes flicked toward him the moment he entered, alert yet calm. "Morning," Daniel muttered, scratching his head. The first woman, the one with silvery hair, gave a soft nod. "Morning," she repeated, carefully shaping the word. Her accent was heavy, but she was trying. Daniel noticed they had arranged his blankets neatly in the corner. They hadn't touched anything else, not even the food in the kitchen. For some reason, their discipline surprised him. "You hungry?" he asked, moving toward the fridge. The second woman tilted her head. "Hungry? Yes." Daniel pulled out bread, eggs, and milk. He set them on the counter, then hesitated. "Can you even eat this? I mean, you're not human." The first woman smiled faintly. "We learn. We adapt." That answer was both comforting and unsettling. Still, Daniel cooked scrambled eggs and toast. As the smell filled the air, both women leaned forward, curious like children seeing something new. When he placed plates before them, they examined the food carefully before tasting it. To Daniel's relief, they ate without hesitation after the first bite. Their eyes widened slightly, and he realized they liked it. "Good?" he asked. The second woman nodded. "Warm, strong food." Daniel laughed nervously. "Glad to hear it." As they ate, Daniel tried to start a conversation. "So, do you have names?" The 2 women glanced at each other, then back at him. The silvery-haired one spoke first. "Name hard to say in your tongue, but call me Lyra." The darker-haired one followed. "I am Saris." "Lyra and Saris," Daniel repeated, testing the names on his tongue. They sounded strange, yet fitting. "All right, I'm Daniel." Lyra gave a small smile. "Daniel. House Daniel." He frowned. "House Daniel?" "Yes," Lyra said simply. "House is you. You are house." Saris added. "Shelter and host. On our world, same meaning. When you give shelter, you give yourself." Daniel felt heat rise to his face. "That's a little intense." The two women exchanged confused looks, clearly not understanding why he was embarrassed. Daniel decided to change the subject. "Where did you come from? I mean, before Earth?" Lyra's eyes softened, distant. "Far star. Too far for your words. We were sent on mission, but shipbroken. Enemies chase." Saris's voice grew sharper. "Hunters. They not stop. They find us." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Hunters, you mean someone's after you?" Both women nodded grimly. "And they'll come here?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "Not yet," Lyra said. "But they will search. We must hide." Daniel rubbed his temples. This was getting worse by the minute. It wasn't just two lost aliens in his house. It was two fugitives being hunted by others. If anyone else discovered them, there would be panic. Still, a strange part of him felt drawn in. Despite the danger, he didn't want to push them away. After breakfast, Lyra and Saris followed him around the house with quiet curiosity. They touched books on the shelves, flicked light switches on and off, and marveled at the hum of the refrigerator. Their fascination reminded Daniel of children discovering the world for the first time. When Saris turned on the television, the moving images startled her. She nearly raised her hand as if ready to defend herself. Daniel quickly explained. "It's not real, just stories. Entertainment." She relaxed but stared at the screen, mesmerized. Lyra joined her, and soon both were leaning forward, studying the cartoon characters bouncing across the screen. Daniel couldn't help but smile. For all their alien appearance, they weren't so different. As the day stretched on, Daniel began asking more questions, and slowly the women revealed pieces of their culture. On their world, a house was considered sacred. Whoever provided shelter became bonded with those they sheltered. It wasn't ownership in the way humans thought. It was more like an unbreakable trust. "That is why we say this house is ours," Lyra explained softly. "Because you gave it, even if you did not speak it. You let us stay. Now bond exists." Daniel swallowed. "So, what, you're saying I'm stuck with you?" Saris's lips curved in the faintest hint of amusement. "You can send us away, but bond cannot be undone." Daniel groaned. Great, just great. Yet even as he complained, a part of him didn't mind. There was something comforting about their presence, even if it was bizarre. That evening, Daniel brought out more food: canned beans, rice, and leftover chicken. Once again, they ate gratefully, their eyes filled with quiet appreciation. Afterward, Lyra helped him wash dishes. She handled the sponge with awkward hands but seemed determined to learn. "You don't have to," Daniel said. "Bond means share," she replied simply. Saris, meanwhile, had wandered to the window, staring out at the quiet street. Her shoulders tensed. People, outside, they look. Daniel joined her and saw two neighbors walking their dog, glancing toward the house. Nothing unusual, but Saris's expression was sharp with worry. "They can't know," she whispered. "We must hide." Daniel frowned. "Relax. They're just neighbors. They don't know anything." But Saris didn't relax. Her instincts were different from his. She was always on alert, as though expecting danger at every corner. That night, Daniel sat with them in the living room. The conversation was slow, broken by their limited English and his complete lack of their language. But still they managed. They asked about Earth, its people, its rules, its sky. Daniel asked about their home, their cities, their families, their lives before the crash. Lyra spoke with nostalgia, describing towers of crystal that caught the light of two suns and fields of silver grass that glowed under starlight. Saris spoke less, but when she did, her words carried weight. She described warriors, battles, and the cold silence of space. Daniel listened, captivated. It all sounded impossible, yet the sincerity in their voices made it feel real. As the hours passed, something changed in the atmosphere. The fear and tension of their first meeting began to fade. Daniel no longer saw them only as intruders. He saw them as stranded travelers, alone on a world they didn't understand. And in their eyes he noticed something too, a softening when they looked at him, a recognition that he wasn't just another human. He was the one who had given them shelter. By midnight, the three of them sat quietly, the room filled with an odd but gentle peace. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhausted but strangely content. He realized that against all logic he was beginning to trust them. As he prepared to head to bed, Lyra spoke softly. "Daniel." He paused. "Yeah?" She hesitated, then said, "Thank you. For house?" Daniel nodded, unsure what to say. "You're welcome, I guess," Saris added in her low voice. "We will not forget." Daniel went to bed with those words echoing in his mind. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Hunters, neighbors, authorities, any of them could appear. But tonight, his house was alive in a way it had never been before. And though he would never admit it aloud, he no longer felt alone. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. The air in his house felt different, thicker, almost like it was carrying an invisible weight. He knew it wasn't just in his head. Something was changing. And not just inside, his walls. When he entered the living room, Lyra and Saris were already awake. They sat by the window, their silver eyes scanning the street outside. Both looked tense, as if they had been keeping watch all night. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, rubbing his tired eyes. "People," Saris said in her sharp voice. "They look too much. They watch." Daniel frowned and peeked through the curtain. Sure enough, he saw his neighbor, Mr. Clark, standing in his yard, arms crossed, staring at Daniel's house for a little too long. It wasn't unusual for Clark to be nosy, but this time the man's eyes lingered. Daniel sighed. "Great, just what I need." Lyra turned toward him. "We cause you trouble." Daniel shook his head. "It's not your fault. Clark's always been suspicious, but if he starts talking, others will listen. And if the wrong people find out you're here..." He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. Saris's hand rested near the strange device on her wrist. "If danger comes, we defend." Daniel held up his hands quickly. "No, you can't just fight my neighbors, that'll make everything worse." The two women exchanged glances but said nothing more. After breakfast, Daniel tried to go about his day as normally as possible. He turned on the television, fixed himself coffee, even opened his laptop to pretend he was working. But every so often he caught sight of Lyra or Saris pacing quietly, alert to every noise outside. By afternoon, the tension only grew. A few kids ran past the house laughing and pointing. Daniel didn't hear what they said, but he saw the way they peeked through the windows before running off. His stomach twisted. Rumors were spreading. He closed the curtains tightly. "We can't keep doing this. People are going to start asking questions." Lyra placed a hand gently on his arm. "We trust you, Daniel. You decide. But leaving, not safe for us." Daniel looked at her soft silver eyes, then at Saris's guarded expression. He knew they were right. If they left, they'd be noticed even faster. And if these so-called hunters were really searching for them, the open world would be even more dangerous than his house. That night, Daniel tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Every sound outside made him flinch. Around midnight, a loud knock rattled the front door. His heart leapt into his throat. Lyra and Saris were instantly on their feet, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Saris whispered, "Stay back. Could be them." Daniel swallowed hard. "Them? Who do you mean?" "Hunters," Saris said firmly. Another knock, louder this time. "Daniel, open up." Relief flooded him when he recognized the voice. It was just Mr. Clark, the neighbor. Daniel hurried to the door before the women could do anything reckless. He cracked it open and forced a smile. "Evening, Clark. What's going on?" Clark leaned against the frame, eyes narrowing. What's going on is strange noises and strange figures around your house. Folks are talking. Kids say they saw something through your window. Daniel's pulse raced. He forced a laugh. Figures? You mean my cousins? They're visiting. Clark raised an eyebrow. Cousins, huh? Funny, they don't look much like family. Daniel tried to keep calm. You saw them? Must have been a quick glance. Look, Clark, it's late. Can we talk? Tomorrow? But Clark's eyes slid past Daniel into the dim house. For a split second, Daniel was terrified he might spot Lyra or Saris, but the two women had moved silently out of sight. Clark finally shrugged. All right, but I'm keeping an eye on you, Daniel. Town doesn't need secrets. Secrets bring trouble. With that, he walked off into the night. Daniel closed the door quickly and leaned against it, breathing heavily. That was close. In the shadows, Lyra and Saris emerged silently. Saris's voice was low, tense. He suspects. He will tell others. Daniel nodded grimly. I know. And once the town starts gossiping, it won't stop. Lyra stepped closer. Then we must prepare. Prepare for what? Daniel asked. Both dangers, Lyra said softly. Humans outside and hunters above. Daniel blinked. Above? Saris raised her wrist device, tapping it until strange symbols floated in the air. A small map appeared, glowing faintly. At the edges, red markers pulsed. They are near, Saris explained. Their ship waits beyond your sky. They search for us. They always search. Daniel's stomach dropped. It was one thing to hear about alien hunters in theory. It was another to see proof. His safe, quiet town was under the shadow of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. So, what happens if they find you here? He asked quietly. They destroy, Saris said without hesitation. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Destroy what? Everything, Lyra whispered. Us. You. This place. The word sent a chill through Daniel's entire body. He stumbled back into a chair, trying to catch his breath. His life had gone from simple to unimaginable in just a few days. And now, his home wasn't only sheltering aliens, it was standing between two worlds. He looked up at Lyra and Saris. They stood together, strong yet fragile, their silver eyes watching him with a mix of trust and fear. Why me? Daniel asked finally, his voice breaking. Why did you pick my house? Why not somewhere else? Lyra knelt beside him, her voice gentle. Because you opened door, others would close. You are different, Saris added. Hunters fear weapons. They do not fear kindness, but kindness, stronger than weapons. Daniel shook his head. I'm not strong. I don't even know what I'm doing. Lyra gave a small smile. You gave us food. You gave us shelter. That is strength. Daniel looked between them, torn between fear and responsibility. He didn't want this burden, but at the same time, he couldn't imagine turning them away. Finally, he stood, fists clenched. All right, if we're doing this, then we need a plan. If your hunters come here, I won't just sit and let them take you. But we can't let my neighbors get suspicious either. So we stay quiet, we stay careful, and if something happens, he took a deep breath. We fight together. Lyra's silver eyes softened with pride. Saris gave a sharp nod, approval in her expression. Bond grows, Saris said quietly. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the window, keeping watch while the two alien women rested. The world outside looked calm, but he knew it was only the calm before a storm. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't just living in his house. He was defending it, against his neighbors, against unseen hunters in the sky, and against the fear that threatened to swallow him whole. Dorlik. Trouble had begun, and deep down he knew it was only the beginning. The night air outside Daniel's house was quiet, but the quiet was not peaceful. It was heavy, tense, like the whole world was holding its breath. Daniel sat in the living room with Lyra and Saris, staring at the strange, glowing map that hovered above Saris's wrist device. The red markers pulsed brighter now, closer than before. "They are moving," Saris said, her sharp voice steady but cold. "They searched this place." Daniel swallowed hard. "And if they find you here?" Lyra's silver eyes softened with sadness. "Then all ends. They take us and they erase what stands in their way." Daniel's chest tightened. He glanced around his living room, his books stacked neatly on the shelf, his old couch, the pictures on the wall. Everything he had known as safe and ordinary could be destroyed in a moment. He had never felt so small, yet never so determined. He stood up. "Then we can't just sit here. We have to fight back." Saris raised an eyebrow. "Fight them? You are only human. No weapon, no armor." Daniel clenched his fists. "Maybe I don't have your weapons, but this is my house. I know every corner, every door, every weak spot. If they come here, they won't find easy prey." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, to his surprise, Saris gave a small nod. "You have spirit. Hunters will not expect that." Lyra stepped closer, her silver hair glowing faintly in the lamplight. "Then we join strength. Your knowledge of house, our knowledge of tools. Together." The bond between them deepened in that moment. Daniel no longer felt like he was protecting strangers. They were standing side by side now, sharing the same danger, facing the same enemy. They began preparing. Saris showed Daniel how to use one of their small devices. It looked like a metal sphere, smooth and glowing faint blue. "This makes shield," she explained. "Only short time, but strong. You place here." She set it in the hallway, and a faint shimmer of light spread across the doorway, invisible, unless he looked closely. Daniel touched it and his hand tingled as though pressed against static electricity. "That's incredible," he whispered. "Not enough to stop all," Saris warned, "but it slows." Meanwhile, Lyra walked with him through the house. They placed small objects, strange rods, thin as pencils, in corners and behind doors. When Daniel asked, she explained, "They make sound wave. Hunters step here, they lose balance." Daniel almost smiled. "Like traps." "Yes," Lyra said softly. "Traps of light and sound." Daniel also added his own touch. He pulled old furniture across windows, stacked chairs against doors, and even dragged a heavy table to block the back entrance. It wasn't advanced like their tools, but it gave him a sense of control. "This is our fortress now," he said with a shaky laugh. Saris looked at him, her expression unreadable. Fortress of one human. Strange but strong. As midnight neared, the first sign of the hunters appeared. A low hum filled the air, so faint at first that Daniel thought it was only his imagination. But then the sound grew, vibrating through the walls of the house. Lyra and Saris froze, their eyes sharp. "They are here," Saris whispered. Daniel rushed to the window and peeked outside. At first, the street looked empty, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. But then the shadows shifted, shapes moved, tall figures cloaked in strange armor that shimmered like liquid metal. They walked with precision, scanning every house as they advanced. Daniel's heart pounded. "They're coming down the street." Lyra's hand tightened on his arm. "They come for us. But now, they face you too." The hunters moved silently, almost like ghosts. When they reached Daniel's yard, one raised a strange device. A beam of light scanned across the house, making the walls tremble slightly. "They know," Saris said grimly. "They sense us inside." Daniel's breath came fast. He wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. This was his home. Running meant giving up. The first strike came suddenly. The front door rattled as if hit by a battering ram, though no one touched it. The invisible shield Saris had placed shimmered brightly, holding the force back. "They test barrier," Saris explained calmly. "It holds, for now." The hunters moved again. This time a window shattered as a burst of energy struck it. The sound was sharp and violent. Daniel flinched but saw the shimmer of another barrier flicker, stopping the blast from entering. "They are strong," Lyra whispered. "But we are not weak." Then the fight began. The hunters forced their way forward, and the house shook under each strike. Saris activated the sound traps, and suddenly the hunters stumbled, their armor vibrating with the invisible waves. One fell to the ground, crashing against Daniel's porch. Daniel's eyes widened. "It works." "Not for long," Saris warned. Daniel grabbed a heavy broomstick, the closest thing he had to a weapon. He positioned himself near the back door, where he heard footsteps approaching. When the door burst open, the shimmer of the shield slowed the intruder. Without thinking, Daniel swung the broom with all his strength. The hunter staggered back, caught off guard by the human's strike. Daniel's arms ached, but adrenaline pushed him forward. "Get out of my house," he shouted. The hunter recovered quickly, but before it could advance, a flash of light streaked across the room. Lyra had fired a small device, sending the intruder crashing against the wall. She turned to Daniel, her eyes shining. "You fight well," Daniel panted. "I just hit things with a stick." "Sometimes," Lyra said softly, "stick is enough." The battle raged through the night. Hunters forced their way through windows, only to be met with shields and traps. Saris moved with sharp precision, her hands activating strange devices that pulsed with light. Lyra fought with more grace, her movements almost like a dance as she struck enemies with bursts of energy. And Daniel, though he had no alien weapon, fought with pure determination. He blocked doors, shoved furniture to slow the intruders, and struck whenever he saw an opening. His house shook, his body ached, but his spirit refused to bend. At one point, Saris shouted, "More come!" "Too many." Daniel's chest heaved. "We can't give up." He looked around at the mess. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, scorch marks on the walls. His safe, quiet home was now a battlefield. And yet, he felt something he had never felt before: pride. This was his place, his ground, and he would not let it fall. Together they pushed back. Lyra unleashed a final burst of light from her wrist device, forcing the hunters to retreat toward the yard. Saris activated another trap, making the ground quake beneath their armored feet. Finally, as dawn began to break, the hunters pulled back. Their figures shimmered and vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only silence. Daniel collapsed onto the couch, breathing hard. His arms shook, his body sore, but his eyes burned with fire. "They're gone," he whispered. "For now," Saris corrected. She stood tall, though her shoulders carried the weight of exhaustion. "They will return. Stronger." Lyra knelt beside Daniel, her soft eyes filled with quiet admiration. But tonight, they met something new. A human who does not run. Daniel gave a weak laugh. "A human with a broomstick." Saris tilted her head. "No, a human with courage." Daniel leaned back, staring at the wrecked ceiling. His house would never be the same again, but neither would he. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just Daniel from the small town. He was Daniel, who had stood against the unknown and refused to break. And though the hunters would surely return, he knew one thing: they would never forget the night they clashed with a human in his own home. The sun rose slowly over the town, its golden light spilling across Daniel's battered house. Windows were shattered, furniture broken, and walls scorched with strange burns. What had once been a quiet home now looked like it had survived a storm. But inside, Daniel sat on the couch with Lyra and Saris, breathing the quiet morning air with a strange sense of relief. "They're gone," Daniel whispered again, as if saying the words would make them truer. Saris stood near the window, her posture tall and sharp. "Gone, but not defeated. They will return." Daniel's body ached from the night's battle, but his spirit was still burning. "Let them," he said firmly. "This house isn't easy to take." Lyra sat beside him, her silver eyes soft. "You stood with us. You could have left us to them, but you chose to fight." Daniel gave a tired smile. "It's my house, and I don't abandon people who need help." Saris turned from the window, her sharp gaze resting on him. For the first time since they met, her expression softened. "You are not like others. On our world, kindness is rare. You use it like a weapon." Daniel chuckled. "Never thought kindness could be a weapon." "It is," Saris said. "Hunters fear it, because they do not understand it." As the day went on, the three worked together to repair what they could. Daniel hammered boards over broken windows while Lyra carefully cleaned the shards of glass from the floor. Saris examined the damaged walls, placing small glowing patches on cracks that sealed them instantly. "Wish I had those for everything," Daniel muttered, watching her work. "Not strong forever," Saris explained. "But it holds." Despite the mess, there was a sense of unity in their movements. The house might have been broken, but they were no longer strangers inside it. Each action carried trust, like threads, weaving them closer together. During lunch, Daniel warmed soup, on the stove, the most normal thing he could think to do. He set 3 bowls on the table. Lyra tasted hers and smiled faintly. "Warm food, safe food," Daniel laughed. "You really like soup, don't you?" She nodded. "Soup is comfort." Saris raised her spoon carefully as though considering each taste. "Food here is simple but strong." Daniel leaned back, watching them eat. He thought about how just a few days ago he had walked into his house expecting a normal evening. Now, his home was a refuge for 2 alien women, and he had fought off hunters from the stars. His old life felt like a distant memory. Later, while they rested, Daniel stepped outside. The street was quiet again, though he noticed Mr. Clark across the way, staring as usual. Clark narrowed his eyes but didn't approach. Perhaps he had heard the noise last night but couldn't explain it. Or maybe he didn't want to know. Daniel walked back inside, shutting the door firmly. This was his world to protect, and he wasn't about to let rumors or curious eyes change that. When he returned, Lyra was standing by the bookshelf, her fingers brushing over the spines of his books. "These stories?" she asked. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Stories humans tell. Some true, some made up." She pulled one out at random, a worn adventure novel. She opened it carefully, her silver eyes scanning the words. "Your people write their courage," she said softly. Daniel tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "On our world," Lyra explained, "we live courage, but we forget it when danger comes. You humans. You write it down, so it never disappears." Daniel had never thought of books that way before. Her words made him see his shelf in a new light. Saris joined them, holding her small device. "Hunters are far for now, but they watch, they wait, they do not forgive." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be ready when they come back." Saris studied him. "You cannot fight them forever." "No," Daniel admitted, "but we don't have to fight forever. We just have to survive long enough to prove something." "Prove what?" Saris asked. "That Earth isn't helpless. That I'm not helpless. That if they come here again, they'll remember this place as the one house they couldn't take." Lyra's eyes shimmered with quiet pride. "House, Daniel," she said softly. "Now our house too." The evening came, and the 3 of them sat together in the living room. The walls were scarred, the windows patched, but the room felt warmer than it ever had. The television flickered quietly in the background, but none of them really watched. Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "So what now? You can't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the world will notice." Saris was silent for a long moment before answering. "Then we move when time is right, but until then, this is home." Lyra nodded. "Home is not walls. Home is bond. We found bond here." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He looked around his house, the couch, the books, the old photographs. Everything was still his, but now it was more than his. It was shared, transformed. For the first time, he didn't feel like the house was too quiet or too empty. It was alive, filled with voices, trust, and something stronger than fear. That night, Daniel stepped outside one last time. The sky was dark, stars scattered across the endless black. Somewhere out there the hunters were waiting, but he didn't feel small anymore. Lyra joined him at the doorway, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "You are not afraid," she said quietly. Daniel looked up at the stars. "I am afraid, but I'm not running." Saris appeared beside them, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "Fear with no retreat, that is strength." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just stubborn." Lyra tilted her head. "Stubborn makes walls strong." They stood there together, three figures bound not by blood or world, but by choice. Daniel knew the hunters would return. He knew the neighbors would whisper. He knew nothing would ever be simple again. But he also knew he wouldn't trade it for anything. This was his home, their home. And whatever came next, they would face it together. The story of one man and his house had become something greater, a bond between worlds, a promise written not in books but in courage and trust. Daniel didn't know where the road ahead would lead. But for now, the house stood tall, scarred but unbroken. And in that house, a human and two alien women found something no hunter could ever destroy. A home.